Welcome to Home Health 360, a podcast presented by AlayaCare. I'm your host, Jeff Howell, and this is the show about learning from the best in home health care from around the globe. Welcome, folks, to another edition of Home Health 360, where we chat with leaders from around the globe on all things home health and home care. Today, we have two exciting guests. First is Tim Rowan, a nationally known home health consultant for the publisher of the Rowan Report, the industry's premier newsletter since 1999. That's right, since before Y2K. And he's been in home health since 1993 and has been teaching home care agencies how to manage their online reputation since 2015. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Jeff. I'm really happy to be here with the AlayaCare folks.
That's great. And we also have Erin, Vallier, Regional Sales Director at AlayaCare, a global home health software company, and she's a frequent speaker at several state and national associations and spent 8 years in sales and operations at Optimal Home Care in Denver. So this is a very Colorado-heavy episode before joining AlayaCare 3 years ago. Erin, as always, it's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jeff.
So, Tim, why don't we start with you? Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background, about how Rowan Reputation Resources came to be, and your technology newsletter for over 22 years. So let's start there and give us a view of who Tim Rowan is.
Well, you've pretty much already aged me, so I guess there's nothing else to hide. I started working as the IT director for a home health agency here in Colorado Springs in 1993. After having been their outside networking consultant for a couple of years already, I was installing Novell networks for them, literally crawling around in the ceilings, installing cable and everything when I was younger. And, after 5 years, those of you who will remember IPS will remember that about 2,500 home health agencies were shut down by that cruel payment system in the late 90s. Ours survived, but only by laying off 8 people all at once. So fortunately, I had met a few people who were sort of on the national stage. I spoke at a conference by the group that today is known as Decision Health, and I met some people, and when I was laid off, I started making some phone calls, and the Decision Health people had this little newsletter, and one of the other speakers at the conference was a nationally known home care technology consultant. So they invited me to start writing, and they told me to call the consultant if there was ever anything that I didn't understand about the interviews I was doing or the stories that they asked me to write about. So about 3-4 months after that, in 1998, they shut down that publication. So I called the consultant. His name was Tom Williams. And I said, did you hear that they're shutting down what was then known as Home Care Automation Report? And he said, no, have you taken a job yet? And I said, well, no, I've been collecting unemployment and writing an article here and there, doing interviews. He said, don't do anything until I call you. The very next day, he called me back and said, I just bought Home Care Automation Report. Do you want to write it? So I went from a couple of articles a month to being the editor and chief writer. Our first issue together.
What was the form of distribution? Was it
at that time we were mailing it out. We were printing it and mailing it to people. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and it was going twice a month. Yeah, so there's a big expense there, and it was quite a deal. So I learned everything I could from Tom for about 10 years. Our first issue together was in February of 99. So I guess I'm coming up on 23 years with the newsletter in February.
Yeah.
But he only lasted the first 10. He was my mentor and my partner. He taught me everything, and he died unexpectedly of a heart issue in January of 2009. So exactly 10 years after we started working together, I had to step up and take his place and become the nationally known home care technology consultant. So I kept the newsletter going, changed the name a little bit, and have been doing that ever since, I guess, the summer. It officially became mine in the summer of '09.
Yeah. And I would imagine, especially back in 1999, there wasn't a thing called content marketing back then. I would presume that was there even anyone else that was so focused on this niche?
No, there wasn't. There was no other technology publication for home health, home care, or hospice. So we pretty much had it cornered in a sense, but that gave us the ability to go electronic in, I think it was '05 when we converted. For a while, we were creating a PDF, a 12-page PDF once a month, and emailing that to people. So we were half electronic. And then we built a website, and we converted from the way Decision Health had it, which was subscriber supported. It was like $250 a year, to advertiser supported. So we brought in advertisers for the first time in '05 and immediately went from 500 subscribers to 5,000. And since then, it's built up to about 10,000. So
wow.
the advertisers like AlayaCare and others have been extremely supportive for the last 15, 16 years. And the newsletter has been doing well. I've got a full-time advertising salesperson. I have a full-time writer besides myself, and I accept guest articles. So we put it out every week now, actually 3 times a month, for about 4 or 5 news articles every issue.
Yeah, that's fascinating because you're in my inbox regularly, but I never had a sense of just how many subscribers you have. That's incredible. That's an amazing story of a small media entity that's dominating a niche.
Yeah,
Definitely
I've been
pioneer
fortunate
in the space.
Exactly. Yeah, I've been.
Well, Erin,
I've been fortunate.
Erin, let me go over to you. I'll give us a little history lesson on how you came to come into home care, and then your path from home care switching over to a healthcare technology company like AlayaCare.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, like a lot of people in the home care space, I got into it, or I got passionate about it just from a personal experience. Right before my 21st birthday, I was in a near fatal car accident and ended up living with my grandmother after being discharged out of the hospital and needing home care. But I was in such a rural part of Georgia, and the insurance that we had wasn't so fantastic. I didn't have access to the care that I needed to recover. I literally got a visit one time from a PT, OT, and RN that left a sheet of paper. Was like, if you want to use your arms and legs again, this is what you do. Good luck with you. Have a nice life. And I felt like ever since that moment that there was just something wrong. There was something broken about the system. And I wanted to be a part of the solution. So after recovery, getting finished with my degree, I, along the way, had befriended the owner of a larger agency in Colorado. And of course, what did I do? I went to him and I said, give me a job. And he said, no, I can't pay you enough. I'm like, come on, I need the experience. He's like, no, trust me, this is home care. You don't want to be involved. I can't pay you enough. And I took no for an answer for the first time. And then about 3 months later, I was like, I just had this burning desire to be in home care because I just wanted to be a part of the solution in some way. I finally convinced him to get me an interview. They were hiring for quality management. So I took the interview and I showed up at work, knocked on his door for his office. And I was like, hey, how are you doing? He's like, what are you doing here? It's like, I work here now. And so that's how I got into home care. I started in the quality management department and then very quickly picked up the technology that we were using and very quickly became known as the EMR administrator as part of my role. So I was creating forms and workflows and training the clinicians as just part of my role as it evolved over the years. And that was kind of a natural segue into AlayaCare, right? So the company I worked for saw AlayaCare at NAC one year and got super passionate about it. And they brought the CEO down to our conference, our user conference, our employee conference. And I got to meet Adrian, and I think Neil at that time. It was like 2014 maybe. And I just followed AlayaCare ever since then, because I was just super curious about the technology and where it was going, and if we would be able to use it at the agency I was working at. I just kept in touch. And as soon as they were ready to hire someone on U.S. soil, I got tapped on the shoulder. And that's how I ended up at AlayaCare.
That's interesting. It's I'm always fascinated when I hear people that were affected by some of the shortcomings of home care. Usually it's, a family member. Mm-hmm. But in this case, I knew you were in the car accident. I didn't know you had these rural visits that were not really being filled.
Yeah, it was no access. And there's just no reason for that.
Yeah. Well, Tim, let me go back over to you. Erin and I were both wondering, since you've been sending out the report since 1999, you must have seen a lot of change over the years with EMRs. Give us the cliff notes on, the state of how things were back then. And maybe, Erin, you can let me know as well from your career at Optimal, how things were with your EMR, and how you guys see things sort of moving forward, and what's the evolution.
Well, when I started, a lot of people I'm sure will remember, the question was, what size of laptop should you use if you make the rare decision to send your clinical staff out into the field with any kind of point of care device at all? When I started, we were using a DOS system. And we switched from there and upgraded to another DOS system. And right before I left, they were in the process of switching to one that was on Unix. So when I started to write, the early stories that I was writing about were, do you want to use this Windows thing that's coming out? And are there any EMRs, which was not a term that anybody used in the early 2000s, are there any EMRs that are on Windows? And should we be on the bleeding edge of technology? And should we try that? The only other thing that was different was before I left that home health agency, I had gone to a local conference in Denver where they were showing off these big boxes that you would put in the home that had video cameras and could do two-way communications with people. Pretty much the reaction to that was, who would want to do that? Why is this needed? Why is this necessary? So yeah, in the early days that we were concerned about the switch over to Oasis, the introduction of PPS, which people were thrilled to get rid of IPS in the Medicare side. But and at that time too, there was very little talk about patient pay, private duty. It was afterthought. At least it was to me. Found out later that it was growing like crazy under my nose, and I hadn't noticed it until years later. But I have to throw in, Jeff, you mentioned that I started this before Y2K. I wrote a number of articles about be prepared. It's unlikely that every single software program out there is going to be up to speed and will have a smooth conversion. And the last thing you want to do is be in an airplane on January 31st or January 1st or December 31st. And then my father in California had triple bypass, and I was on an airplane on January 1st.
No way. That's probably the cheapest ticket you ever purchased, I'm assuming.
Yeah, there was nobody sitting next to me.
You scared them all away. Oh, I guess over to me. So I came in a bit later, of course, around 2012. But even then, the solution we were on was server based. And I got the pleasure of sitting next to the server closet, and it got hot. And it wasn't long until we completely outgrew the server based solution completely. The agency grew in census, and the server would overheat. It would shut down. The nurses couldn't do any of the documentation. We couldn't bill. It was hectic. Things would slow down. So I got to see the migration from a server based solution up into the cloud. And that was not without incident either, but I could say that cloud-based solutions totally superior to the server-based solution. It takes a lot of the storage component out of the equation, and your solution is going to be faster. But even since I've been on the provider side, and just in the past 3 years, like the technology, I think the things that have happened to us from an environment standpoint, COVID being one of them, have really accelerated our use of technology in the healthcare space. And that's super exciting to me. Artificial intelligence, natural language processing, predicting things, seeing another person's face, being able to communicate with them virtually. It's just a very exciting time to be in the space. Yeah. But if I'm able to, I'd love to just switch gears just a little bit, because Tim, I know there was some things that you really wanted to talk to us about today that you're really passionate about. And it's something that comes up a lot when I'm talking to prospects, and that is they're not able to staff all of the referrals that are coming their way because they don't have the people on staff. There's a definite shortage of caregivers right now. And I don't think that's just anecdotal evidence. There's a mounting body of evidence published by Home Healthcare News and several other reputable sources that are citing this problem, this recruitment and retention problem, as top of mind for most employers today. And I know that you've written a few articles on the subject recently. And in one of them, you even stated that there's something like 10 million or close to 10 million jobs that are unfilled right now, and about 4 million people who just don't want to go back to work because of COVID concerns or because they're getting unemployment. There's layers to that problem. So let's talk about this. Staffing was a problem even before COVID, but now that we have a pandemic, it's layered on this additional complexity for agencies. What's your take on this? And do you see this problem improving at all in the near future?
Well, I try to be optimistic, so I'll answer that question last. But you're right. I have been hearing at state and national conferences for years that staffing is the number one problem. Whether you're talking nurses or non-medical in-home care givers, the problem is the same. Years ago, the problem was the nursing shortage was so bad that hospitals were so desperate they were going into nursing schools and hiring the teachers. And so that left nursing schools forced to accept fewer students every year. And so the problem compounded itself because to deal with the imminent emergency, they were sacrificing the future. But today, with the complications of the pandemic, things have accelerated, like you said. So here's what I see. There are a lot of consultants out there who come out of the HR world, and they have excellent messages that deal with a quarter of the problem. They talk about how you got to really be nice to people. Maybe you have to pay them more, pats on the back. Years ago, there was a study that retention was improved when the non-medical caregivers, the home health aides, were given lab coats. They were different color than the nurses, but that helped with retention. So there's all these ideas out there about how to improve hiring and retention of existing staff. And they're all good, but there's a technology level that I have discovered since I began to focus on this problem that changes the entire perspective of how people are drawn into a job and how they are kept on a job. And interestingly enough, hourly rate is not the first thing on their list. It's the respect that they're given and the number of hours they're given. So if you hire a caregiver and you can only keep them busy 25 hours a week, you're not going to keep them. So that's more important to them on surveys that I've seen than the hourly rate. So I have found some technologies that I think very highly of that have been proven to help with the problem. First of all, with regard to hiring, of course, there's places like Indeed, where you can put out an ad and you'll get 100 responses in no time at all. And there are several services just like that. And there are local ads. And there are a number of different proven ways to bring people in. But here is the problem. Not everybody is suited to be an in-home caregiver. Nurses are a little bit of a different story. They have a degree and they have experience and they have a specialization. But when you're talking about the expanding elderly population and you're talking about people who need a little bit of care, but not necessarily nursing care, you're talking about your typical unskilled caregiver. I hate that word. Your non-medical caregiver who might be making between $10 and $15 an hour. Frequently, these turn out to be single mothers of color, right? The vast majority of them, not exclusively, but the desperation of an agency owner to get bodies in the field has led people to hire everybody who passes one test. They have the ability to blow up a balloon. So any breathing person, it gets hired. They pass the background check, which is another expense. They go through orientation and training. And that process, okay, your HR person, your person doing the interviews, the background check, orientation and training costs, in the surveys that I've seen, in the neighborhood of $4,000 to $4,500. All too frequently, that person leaves before taking the first shift, and that $4,500 is sunk. And when you're short-staffed and the desperation leads you to hiring anybody and everybody, the number of people that don't work out increases. And that expense is killing home care agencies. So one of the technologies I have found that has proven to work is filtering system. It's kind of complicated to go into now, but it's a simple Q&A. They write out longhand their answers, and the algorithm can predict whether they will work out as a good caregiver and will stay, as opposed to not being suited for the job, cost you the $4,500 and then leave. So I've been promoting that technology in the articles that I have been writing. And then one other real quickly that I've been promoting is the extreme importance of your online reputation. When an octogenarian or anybody out of the hospital, anybody who needs any kind of care, is looking for care, who's actually looking? It's usually the adult daughter who lives 500 or more miles away, right? And so that person does not see your local TV ads. They don't hear your radio ads. They don't see your Yellow Pages ads. They look you up online. And the modern adult daughter and son doesn't just look you up. They read about you. They read your reviews. And they select you based on your local reputation. So that's the other technology that I'm very high on recently, is the technology that helps you to get more reviews, more positive reviews, more recent reviews, and bring you up to the top of those Google searches that are all important when the adult daughter is searching for anybody, because they know what they want but they don't know who they want. And so I've been teaching
That's a very
people
good point.
recruiting, filtering so you don't hire everybody, and then building your reputation, which also helps with recruiting. You get your happy employees to write a review. Other people say, oh, that's a good place to work. And those three different technologies work together to build up your workforce.
So that there was a lot to unpack there. Let's go back to the first technology you were talking about. While you were saying that, here's how I interpreted what the technology is about. It's almost like a natural language processor or something, because you're forcing people to write out long form answers. They are unknowingly showing their hand on what kind of person they are, and the technology is matching that, versus someone who has multiple choice questions and gets every answer right, but you don't really, you're judging their knowledge, not their personality. Tell me where I went wrong in trying to digest what you
you're exactly right, except this
for.
company known as Millimatch wouldn't use natural language processing as their descriptor.
Okay.
They do talk about applied cognitive linguistics. And their system of 5 or 6 questions with 2 or 3 sentences each is patented and actually has been proven to work. They give the HR department a score. The HR department, after time, learns the floor of the scoring number below which they have discovered the new hire is not going to work out. So it might be 55, 60, 65, 80 for any given agency. But then once you find your number, when you get the score from Millimatch, you can decide whether to invest the $4,000 into that applicant or not.
And maybe you actually give an above market offer to someone who looks like might be a superstar. And before we go any further, can I so for the people that are listening out there, it's Millimatch, as in Millimatch.
Yeah,
is that right?
That's it. That's it.
Okay. And so I'm assuming it's millimatch.com if anyone wants to go
That's
find
how
some
you
more
find them,
information
right?
Okay.
I think it's a fascinating concept. And you said that it's only 5 or 6 questions. So I'm really curious. It seems like it would take a lot of research to figure out which are the 5 or 6 questions that are going to be the most predictive. Do you know anything about how they arrived at these questions, or can you give us an example of what these questions are?
To tell the truth, how they built the technology is a little bit proprietary. So they haven't shared that with me. They've shared the results. The questions, though, are customized to home care. So if that Millimatch is in other industries, the questions are going to be different. So they'll ask about, give me a time when you performed as a caregiver to somebody. And so you'll see people talking about their grandmother. And they might say something about how they hated it and they just don't like old people. Or they might say it was the greatest experience of my life and I got to know my grandmother so well, we developed a relationship. I can't go into any more detail than that because I'll probably go off into what I think it is, not what it really is. But those 5 questions do give a groundwork for Millimatch to analyze the wording, that the word choices, not even the story that they tell, but the word choices have something that run through the algorithm under their patented, I always get this mixed up, applied cognitive linguistics that gives them a hard number score.
And there are home care agencies that are having some success with this right now. Is that right?
Yeah, there are some that I have spoken with that swear by it. One agency owner talked about he's discovered that 62 is his threshold score, and he has some of his best employees, his best in-home caregivers, who he would not have hired. He would not have thought were good caregiving material. One of them had experience as a scheduler for a Pizza Hut or something like that. And she scored high, and he said, all right, I'll take a chance. And after a year, she was the employee of the year. So it doesn't take over your judgment, but it helps to boost your judgment. It helps to improve your decision making.
This is incredible, because as someone who's hired a number of people myself, I know I have a bias towards just kind of liking people and rooting for them, or you're spending too much time looking at someone's past experiences. And the interview process itself is flawed, because it might only be an hour or two where you're trying to judge how they're going to be interacting with people, maybe 40 hours a week.
It does
I'm just shocked that a tool like this hasn't come into play in the healthcare space before now, because we do have it in other industries. Like, what caused Millie Match to lean into the healthcare space here just recently?
They heard, like we all have, about the shortage, about the staffing shortage, and they read about it and heard about how people are hiring anybody and everybody and then regretting it. So they took what they knew, and through word of mouth, they found me, and I have been teaching them about home care for several months now. And they have been using what I've been able to tell them to refine their processes and their questionnaire for the in-home caregiver. And one of the things they told me,
well, Tim,
was,
you
avoid one of those $4,500 bad hires, and you've paid for their system for the whole year.
You've paid for the software.
Yeah, no kidding. Not to mention, you improve the morale of everybody when you're more successful. And although it seems counterintuitive to start with, you're sort of slowing down to speed up, and you're purposely hiring fewer, but you're having a much greater success when you do hire.
And you've probably heard the stories of the training sessions where 6 people were scheduled and nobody showed up.
I've conducted some of those. It's not fun.
Well, Tim, you've written about 4 specific objectives that agencies that they should have as strategies to accomplish if they want to combat caregiver recruiting challenges and turnover. Can you go into a little bit more detail? Maybe give us a few tips on these topics. We've got employer brand to attract applicants. We've got recruiting process excellence. We've got effective communication. Then, of course, probably the easy one is competitive compensation. But what are your thoughts on the first 3? How can home care agencies do things a little bit differently than they've been doing to improve the way they attract and retain?
You can't underestimate the importance of branding. These caregivers, or even people who have not been caregivers before and are looking into it, they have a network. They have a word of mouth system. Somebody knows somebody and say, hey, you're thinking about working for a home care agency? Talk to my friend Johnny. And what they hear is, oh, you don't want to work for that one over there. You want to work for this agency over here. That reputation, that branding, is not necessarily accomplished through TV commercials. 2 reasons. People fast forward through TV commercials, and people don't believe TV commercials. The other way they hear about it is through the yellow pages. And be honest, when's the last time you used the yellow pages? So the location where people are looking for a place to apply is going to be online. They will type in home care and the name of a city. And what Google gives you back when you do that is 3 answers. The top 3 are moved into that position based on Google's criteria, and a large part of that criteria is the reviews. So if you have an existing staff that you can rely on to say nice things about how wonderful it is to work for your company, the first step is to go to them and say, we have a Facebook page, we have a Google business page, and we really need you to go on there and speak honestly about what it's like to work for this company. Then as the word of mouth goes around town and other people look you up, they're going to see employees saying how much they like working at this company. And that will form a direct line to the number of applicants that you get. And when you have enough applicants, then you can afford to filter them out. If you don't have enough, you're going to be in that bad spot where you're just going to hire everybody, right? So more applicants means more filtering with Millimatch and more or fewer bad hires and wasted $4,500. So the online reputation is what used to be the word of mouth over the backyard fence. It's what used to be TV ads and yellow pages. And it's used. When's the last time you took a trip without consulting TripAdvisor or Hotels.com?
Yeah, for sure.
You go to reserve a hotel room and you read the reviews. We all do it. Mm-hmm. Well, the adult children of the AlayaCare customer does it too. So reputation.
Yeah, you make a good point. We avoided a contractor last summer due to the negative reviews after we met him in person and liked him, right? And then you go online and you just see all these negative reviews, and that totally swayed our decision.
Yeah.
What do you think, Erin, when you're in your days in home care? What are your thoughts on all this?
I would totally agree that reputation is super important. Because it's a small circle, right? The caregivers that worked for my agency, if they couldn't get enough hours, they're going to also work at another agency, and they all talk to each other. So definitely that has evolved from word of mouth to this online presence, especially since COVID has impacted us all. Everything has gone more digital because we want to stay socially distanced and safe, and more vigilant. So I would say that the consumers are being even more selective over who they partner with, and those reviews are just becoming even more and more important.
And I bet what you found too, Erin, is that whether it's a nurse or a therapist or an in-home non-medical caregiver, even if they're employed, they're always looking for the next better agency to work for.
Yeah, I've heard there's a bidding war right now going on with nurses between home care and hospital, because hospital can pay the $10,000 signing bonus, but home care can't. So yeah, there's always that poaching going on.
Yeah, I've seen travel nurse positions for $80 an hour and up, and $5,000 and $10,000 signing bonuses.
So that brings in other kinds of technologies. You have to still take care of these patients and these clients with fewer personnel, which means in-home technologies. And more agencies during COVID, during the worst days of COVID, which today are still the worst days in some states, they resorted to in-home monitoring. That means you can take care of people without the in-person risk of COVID, and you can see them every day when you don't have the personnel to do that. So there's been a huge emphasis on in-home patient monitoring in the last 18 months, and everybody has their fingers crossed that it will last and that the payers, both public and private, will see the value and continue to support that as we go forward.
Yeah, I think we will. I mean, we came like 10 years in terms of legislation in about 2 weeks when COVID hit. And
well, there are silver linings in everything, and the expedition of some things that needed to have happen for healthcare in general, and home health and home care as well. At least we can take that, there's some good things that sort of came as a result of necessity out of COVID. So, well, we're really bumping up against our time. And Tim, I know Erin and I had more questions for you, so we might have to have you on another time to sort of get around all the things we want to pick your brain on. So we'll get you out of here on this. If someone's listening and they want to work with Tim Rowan, how do they find you?
I'm really easy to find. I plaster my contact information all over my newsletter, and that can be found at homecaretechreport.com. I have an umbrella website that talks about that and my consulting business and my availability to speak at conferences, and that is at rowanresources.com. And that's Rowan with an A. Everybody kind of tries to sneak an E in there, so it's ROWAN, Rowan Resources.
We'll link to it in the show notes as well.
Rowan
Resource. And I'm pretty sure you have some good Google reviews as well. We won't question you on that.
I have a couple of good ones, yeah. And you can write me directly. It's tim@rowanresources.com. I'd be happy to answer people's questions. I do a consulting business for software selection, and I usually talk to people the first 15 minutes on the phone without charge just to get acquainted. So you can write to me anytime.
Yeah. Super.
Perfect.
Well, this has been a blast. It was a pleasure spending time with both of you today. And I'm sure hopefully we can catch up in real life sometime again soon.
I hope so. I'll have my mask on and I'll be looking for you at the next conference. But yeah, if you run out of time, call me back. We'll get together anytime. Thanks a lot. It's good to be with you, Jeff and Erin.
Great.
Okay, guys, take care.
See everybody.
Bye for now.
So long.
Home Health 360 is presented by AlayaCare. First off, I want to thank our amazing guests and listeners. To get more episodes, you can go to AlayaCare.com/Home Health 360. That's spelled Home Health 360, or search Home Health 360 on any of your favorite podcasting platforms. The easiest way to stay up to date on our new shows is to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We also have a newsletter you can sign up for on AlayaCare.com/Home Health 360 to get alerts for new shows and more valuable content from AlayaCare right into your inbox. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.